I always thought Sofia and I were the perfect pair. It wasn't just how effortlessly we completed each other's sentences, or how every celebration felt like an intimate dance choreographed just for us. It was deeper than that. We were bound not just by love, but by trust. Or so I thought. It started small, as these things often do. A few changes here and there. Sofia, once the woman who would lounge on the couch in old college sweatshirts, started dressing sharper. Her wardrobe shifted to tailored blouses, sleek skirts, and a subtle but undeniable hint of perfume that lingered in the air. At first, I chalked it up to her promotion at Lumina Tech, the innovative startup where she worked as a project manager. She was proud of her work, and I was proud of her. Then came the late nights. "They're running us ragged," she'd sigh, her voice tinged with a tired sweetness as she slipped out of her heels. "Our new VP, Mark. He's pushing us to finalize the product before the investor pitch." Mark. His name came up more often than I liked. A charismatic leader, fresh from some high-profile consultancy firm, who had swept into Lumina Tech with big promises and bigger demands. Sofia spoke about him with a mix of admiration and exasperation, always careful to stress his professionalism. I wasn't threatened. Why would I be? I was her husband, her confidant, her rock. But then, there was the party. It was an annual event at her company, a chance for spouses to mingle with the movers and shakers behind Luminatech's cutting-edge projects. I was looking forward to it, not least because Sofia seemed so excited. She spent an hour fussing over her outfit before we left, finally settling on a crimson dress that clung to her in ways that made me envy every fabric thread. "You look incredible," I said as we stood by the door. She smiled but didn't meet my eyes, busy adjusting her earrings. "Ready?" The party was held in a sleek rooftop venue overlooking the city. The hum of chatter and the clink of glasses filled the air. I didn't know many people, but Sofia quickly vanished into the crowd, introducing me to colleagues as she flitted from one circle to the next. It was during one of those introductions that I met him. "Mark. Sofia tells me you're an engineer," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. His smile was broad, his suit perfectly tailored, and his confidence oozed from every pore. "Mechanical engineer, yeah," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "And you're the VP she's been telling me about?" "That's right. Sofia's one of the brightest on my team. I don't know what I'd do without her," he said, his tone warm, but his eyes flicking towards Sofia. She didn't notice, or maybe she pretended not to. I tried to enjoy the rest of the evening, but something felt off. Every now and then, I'd catch Sofia laughing at something Mark had said, her hand lightly brushing his arm. It wasn't blatant, not enough to make a scene, but it stirred something uneasy in me. That night, as we drove home in silence, I glanced at her, wanting to ask the question swirling in my mind. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and white. The weeks after the party were marked by a strange undercurrent in our home. Sofia was still kind, still attentive in her way, but there was a distance I couldn't ignore. She spent more time at the office, sometimes coming home after midnight. "It's just the push before the investor pitch," she'd say, kicking off her heels as she collapsed onto the couch. "Mark's pushing everyone hard." Mark again. His name was becoming a constant refrain, like a song stuck on repeat. "You're working a lot," I said one evening as she ate dinner, her plate balanced on her lap. "Do you think you'll have some time off once the pitch is over?" "Hopefully," she murmured, not looking up. "We're all putting in insane hours. I'm lucky I can manage even a quick dinner here with you." Her words stung more than I cared to admit. I wanted to believe her, but the cracks were widening. They weren't just in her schedule, they were in our life together. She laughed less, spoke in shorter sentences, and spent more time on her phone, The screen tilted away from me whenever I walked into the room. One evening, while she was in the shower, I spotted her phone charging on the nightstand. It buzzed twice, and the screen lit up, revealing a message preview. Mark, you were incredible today. Couldn't have done it without you. Drink soon? My chest tightened, but I didn't touch her phone. Instead, I stood there, staring at the screen until it dimmed and the message disappeared. When Sofia emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and humming softly, I forced a smile and asked her about her day. She smiled back, her face calm, her tone warm. But that night, as she slept beside me, her back turned like a physical barrier. I couldn't shake the unease coursing through me. The discovery. The tipping point came a week later, when I decided to surprise her at work. It wasn't out of suspicion, not entirely. It was a gesture of love, or at least that's what I told myself. I showed up with her favorite takeout, a bag of noodles from the small Thai place she loved. The receptionist was polite but hesitant. "Sofia's in a meeting," she said. "I can let her know you're here." "That's okay," I replied. "I'll just wait." But as I walked toward the waiting area, I caught sight of Sofia through the glass walls of a conference room. She wasn't alone. Mark stood close, leaning over her shoulder as she pointed at something on her laptop. His posture was casual but intimate, his hand resting on the back of her chair. They weren't touching, not technically, but the energy between them was unmistakable. My pulse quickened, the bag of noodles growing heavier in my hand. I turned and walked out, leaving the food at the receptionist's desk with a curt, "Tell her I stopped by." That night, Sofia came home later than usual. She looked tired but didn't offer any details about her day. I didn't press her, unsure if I could keep my voice steady. Instead, I went to bed early, my mind racing with doubts and unanswered questions. The plan. I decided I needed proof. Not for her, but for myself. I couldn't keep second-guessing her every word, replaying every interaction with Mark in my mind. It was driving me mad. The next day, while she was at work, I installed a small GPS tracker in her car. It was discreet, tucked under the dashboard where she'd never think to look. I felt a pang of guilt as I did it, but it was outweighed by the growing suspicion gnawing at my gut. That evening, when Sofia left for another late-night strategy session, I opened the tracker app on my phone and watched as the blinking dot representing her car moved across the map. It headed toward her office, as expected, but then it kept going, past the building and into a part of town that wasn't on her usual route. I followed, staying a few blocks behind. She pulled into the parking lot of a high-end hotel, her car disappearing into the valet area. I parked across the street, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched her step out of the car. She wasn't dressed for work. Her fitted black dress and heels screamed anything but business. Mark was waiting for her at the entrance, his smile wide as he leaned in to kiss her cheek. She didn't pull away. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. I had my answer, but it wasn't the one I wanted. I didn't go home immediately after seeing Sofia with Mark at the hotel. I sat in my car, parked in a quiet corner far away from the scene, staring into the dark night and trying to process what I had just witnessed. Her betrayal wasn't just an attack on my trust. It shattered the foundation of the life we had built together. When I finally returned home, Sofia was already there. She was curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her legs, her laptop resting on her thighs. She barely looked up when I entered, offering me a distracted smile, as though nothing was out of the ordinary. "You're home late," she said casually, her eyes flicking back to her screen. "Yeah, got held up," I replied, forcing my voice to stay neutral. I wanted to confront her then and there, to unleash the whirlwind of anger that had been brewing inside me. But I held back. Without evidence, it would only turn into a shouting match, one she could dismiss as paranoia or jealousy. Traces of lies. The next morning, I resolved to dig deeper. The sight of her with Mark, their shared smile, and the ease with which she leaned into his space, left no doubt in my mind. I needed to find the truth, not just for myself but to strip away the lies she had been wrapping around me. I started with her phone. Sofia always kept it close, her privacy guarded like a vault. But that morning, as she showered, she left it on the nightstand. It was a rare opportunity, and my hand shook slightly as I picked it up. I entered the passcode I knew by heart and opened her messages. At first, there was nothing unusual, conversations with friends, colleagues, and family. But then I saw it, buried near the bottom of the list, Mark. With a deep breath, I opened the chat. The messages weren't plentiful, but the content was damning. Mark, you looked stunning yesterday. I'm pretty sure no one noticed a thing. Sofia, let's hope so. I hate being this reckless, but it's hard to resist. Mark, worth the risk. Can't wait for our next meeting. The words blurred before my eyes, a searing mix of pain and anger coursing through me. I took a screenshot, ensuring I had a record of this betrayal, and carefully returned the phone to its place before Sofia came out of the bathroom. That night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, I couldn't bring myself to look at her. She scrolled through her phone, smiling faintly at whatever she was reading, while I stared blankly at the muted television screen. The distance between us felt insurmountable. A growing plan. I knew I couldn't act rashly. Sofia was sharp, and if I confronted her without airtight proof, she would turn the situation against me. So, I decided to build my case methodically. I started gathering everything: texts, locations, and patterns. Using the GPS tracker I had installed, I began tracking her movements more closely. The following evening, Sofia claimed she was meeting colleagues for dinner to discuss the final stages of their project. As soon as she left, I checked the tracker. She drove downtown to the same hotel I had seen her at before. I followed from a distance, my heart pounding as I watched her park her car and walk into the building. Mark was already waiting for her at the entrance. They embraced briefly before disappearing inside together. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My instincts were right, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I recorded everything: their meeting, their movements, carefully documenting every detail. This wasn't just a fling. It was a calculated betrayal. The following days were a blur of calculated moves and suppressed emotions. I buried myself in my work during the day, maintaining a facade of normalcy, but my nights were spent unraveling Sofia's lies. Each new piece of evidence added weight to the betrayal, but it also strengthened my resolve. The messages between her and Mark revealed more than I expected. Their meetings weren't just clandestine dinners. They had been coordinating for months, carefully balancing their schedules to avoid suspicion. Mark, we should stick to the plan. No risks, no surprises. Sofia, I know. I just hate lying to him, even though he barely notices anymore. Mark, you said it yourself. He's too distracted to catch on. Those words cut deep. To Sofia and Mark, I wasn't just being betrayed. I was a fool, blind and complacent in their eyes. The thought of them laughing at my ignorance made my blood boil, but I stayed patient. The storm was coming, and I would be ready. A chance encounter. One evening, as I drove home from work, I spotted Mark by chance. He was standing outside a cafe, laughing with another man in a suit. It was the same smug expression I had seen at the company party, the same air of superiority that made my skin crawl. I pulled over, parking just out of sight. As I watched him, an idea began to take shape, a way to turn the tables and expose them both. but I couldn't do it alone. That night, I reached out to Daniel, an old college friend and now a private investigator. He was someone I could trust, someone who had the skills to dig deeper where I couldn't. "Sounds messy," Daniel said after I explained the situation over the phone. "But if she's lying to you, I'll find the proof. Are you sure you're ready for whatever I uncover?" I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. "Yes," I said finally. "I need to know everything." The proof. Within days, Daniel delivered. His findings confirmed what I had already suspected, but went even further. Sofia and Mark weren't just meeting in hotels. They had booked a weekend retreat at a luxury villa 2 months earlier, right under the guise of a work conference. Daniel also uncovered their financial ties. Sofia had opened a separate bank account, discreetly transferring money from our joint savings over the past 6 months. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. When Daniel handed me the photos, Sofia and Mark arm in arm at a vineyard, laughing without a care in the world, something inside me snapped. I stared at the images, my anger simmering beneath the surface. They had built their deceit on my trust, and it was time for their house of lies to crumble. Setting the trap. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Sofia's company was hosting a team dinner that Friday, and spouses were invited. It was the kind of event where everyone would be watching, where appearances mattered most. Sofia brought it up over dinner one night, her tone light and cheerful, as though nothing was wrong. "I was thinking we could go together," she said. "It's been a while since you've met my team." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Sounds like a good idea. I'd love to see everyone again." That Friday, I arrived at the event wearing my best suit, my demeanor calm, but my mind razor sharp. I had everything prepared: the messages, the photos, the financial records. They were all stored on a USB drive in my pocket, ready to be revealed at the perfect moment. Sofia was radiant, her charm on full display as she greeted her colleagues. She introduced me to a few people, her smile never faltering, but I could see the tension in her eyes whenever Mark was nearby. He, too, was careful, keeping a polite distance, but his glances in her direction didn't go unnoticed. The evening passed in a blur of small talk and forced laughter. I bided my time, waiting for the right moment. When Sofia stepped away to speak with Mark near the bar, I approached the event coordinator and quietly explained my plan. The reveal. When the time came, the lights dimmed, and the projector screen at the front of the room flickered to life. Everyone turned their attention to the stage, expecting a presentation about the company's achievements. Instead, they were greeted with a series of screenshots, messages between Sofia and Mark, each more damning than the last. Gasps rippled through the room as the audience processed the implications. Then came the photos, one after another, documenting their secret meetings, their retreat, their stolen moments. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sofia's face turned pale as she stared at the screen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone's eyes. Mark, too, looked stunned, his usual confidence replaced with panic. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I thought it was important to share a little insight into what's been happening behind the scenes." My eyes locked with Sofia's. "Some connections are worth celebrating. Others, well, not so much." The room erupted into chaos as the final photo faded from the screen. Sofia's colleagues whispered among themselves, their glances darting between her and Mark. The weight of their judgment was palpable, suffocating. Sofia stood frozen, her lips parted in shock, as though she couldn't comprehend what was happening. Mark, on the other hand, attempted to salvage his composure, straightening his tie and stepping forward. "This is an outrageous invasion of privacy," he said, his voice shaky but loud enough to command attention. "We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. I raised an eyebrow, my calm exterior masking the fury boiling inside. You don't, Mark. The evidence speaks for itself. Sofia finally found her voice, though it was barely more than a whisper. Alex, please, can we talk about this in private? Private? I repeated, my tone dripping with incredulity. You've been lying to me for months, and now you want privacy? You should have thought about that before you turned our marriage into a spectacle. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and a few people moved toward the door, uncomfortable with the drama unfolding before them. Others, however, remained rooted in place, their curiosity outweighing their discomfort. A public reckoning. Mark's temper flared. You're making a fool of yourself, Alex. This isn't the time or place for. I cut him off, my voice rising. You think I'm the fool? You think I didn't notice the late nights, the secret messages, the lies? You and Sofia planned this betrayal together, and now you're standing here trying to play the victim? Sofia's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. I never meant for it to get this far, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know how to stop. I was scared, Alex. Scared of losing you, scared of. Spare me the excuses, I snapped. You weren't scared. You were selfish. The silence that followed was deafening. Sofia covered her face with her hands, her sobs muffled, while Mark glared at me, his jaw clenched. The final blow. I turned to the gathered crowd, my voice steady but cold. For those of you wondering why I chose to do this here, let me make it clear. Sofia and Mark betrayed not just me, but the trust of everyone in their lives. And sometimes, people need to see the truth for themselves. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and handed it to Sofia's boss, who had been standing off to the side, his expression a mix of shock and disgust. Everything's on here, I said. The messages, the financial records, the photos. Do with it what you will. The man accepted the drive without a word, his lips pressed into a thin line. Turning back to Sofia, I took a deep breath. You and Mark deserve each other. Enjoy the mess you've made. With that, I walked out, leaving the room and its stunned occupants behind. My heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of what I'd just done, but there was also a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in doubt and suspicion. I had taken control, breaking the chains. The drive home was quiet, the silence in my car mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. When I reached the house, I began packing. Not just for the night, but for good. Clothes, toiletries, important documents. I threw it all into suitcases and bags with mechanical efficiency. By the time Sofia returned, her face blotchy from tears, I was ready to leave. She stood in the doorway, her voice hoarse as she begged, Alex, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll quit my job, It's too late. I interrupted, my tone flat. You didn't just betray me, Sofia. You destroyed the life we built together. There's no coming back from that. She reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Don't make this harder than it already is. I walked past her without another word, my bags in hand, and drove away. As the house disappeared in my rearview mirror, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. I had lost Sofia, but I had also freed myself from the lies that had been suffocating me. The days following my departure from the house were strange and quiet. I stayed at a small, no-frills hotel on the edge of town, spending my evenings staring at the peeling wallpaper and wondering how my life had unraveled so quickly. My phone buzzed constantly, calls and texts from Sofia, alternating between desperate pleas and angry outbursts. I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. The legal side of things was cold and clinical, a sharp contrast to the raw emotions I was wrestling with. It was draining, but every step forward felt like another brick in the wall I was building between myself and the pain of the past. A moment of reflection. One evening, as I sat in the dim light of the hotel room, my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the screen. It wasn't Sofia this time. It was a message from Daniel, the private investigator. Got something you might want to see. Can we meet? Curiosity outweighed my exhaustion. I agreed, and we met at a small diner on the outskirts of town. Daniel slid into the booth across from me, a manila envelope in his hand. You've got enough to move forward with the divorce, he said, placing the envelope on the table. But I kept digging just in case. There's more. I opened the envelope cautiously, pulling out the contents, photos, financial records, and correspondence. Among them was a series of emails between Mark and someone named Vincent, an investor in Sofia's company. It looks like they were using company funds to finance their excursions, Daniel explained. Not just the hotels and trips, but also personal expenses. It's fraud, Alex. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Sofia's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was criminal. She and Mark had been embezzling money under the guise of work-related expenses, using their affair as a cover for something even more damaging. Taking action. The next morning, I handed the evidence to my lawyer. This changes everything, he said, his eyes scanning the documents. If this goes public, it won't just end her career. It could lead to criminal charges. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Despite everything, I didn't want to destroy Sofia's life completely. But then I thought about how easily she had destroyed mine, how little regard she'd had for the truth or the trust we'd shared. Do whatever you need to do, I said finally. She made her choices. Now she can live with them. The collapse. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the fallout from Sofia and Mark's actions began to spread. Their company launched an internal investigation, and the findings were damning. Mark was fired immediately, his reputation in tatters. Sofia was suspended without pay, pending further review. Word spread quickly, and soon Sofia's colleagues and friends began to distance themselves. The whispers turned to gossip, and gossip turned to public humiliation. She called me one evening, her voice breaking. Alex, please. You don't have to do this, she said. We can still fix things. There's nothing to fix, Sofia. I replied, my tone cold. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself. Now you have to face the consequences. A glimmer of hope. Amid the chaos, I found unexpected solace in rebuilding my life. I moved into a small apartment closer to work, furnished with the bare essentials. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I began reconnecting with old friends, people I'd lost touch with during my years with Sofia. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The scars of Sofia's betrayal were still fresh, but they no longer defined me. I was moving forward. Weeks turned into months, and the chaos surrounding Sofia's actions gradually began to settle, at least for me. I finalized the divorce and ensured I was protected from any fallout from her financial misconduct. My lawyer was thorough, and Sofia's attempts to negotiate softer terms fell flat. By the time the ink dried on the papers, I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the life I had shared with someone who turned out to be a stranger. For Sofia, things were far from settled. The investigation into her and Mark's embezzlement uncovered a trail of misused funds, and the company filed charges. Mark fled the state, leaving Sofia to face the legal repercussions alone. The details made headlines: her name becoming synonymous with scandal in our circle of friends and beyond. An unexpected encounter. One afternoon, as I walked into a small cafe to grab a coffee, I saw a familiar face sitting at one of the tables. It was Sofia. She looked different, thinner, paler, and older in a way that had nothing to do with time. Her once confident demeanor was replaced with a fragile, almost haunted air. She spotted me and hesitated for a moment before gesturing toward the empty seat across from her. Against my better judgment, I walked over and sat down. "Alex," she began, her voice soft and hesitant. "Thank you for sitting with me. I know I'm the last person you want to see." "You're right about that," I said, keeping my tone even. "What do you want?" I wanted to apologize. For everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." Her words were sincere, but they carried little weight. I had heard too many lies from her to trust her now. Still, I let her speak. "I ruined us," she continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "I ruined you. I don't know why I let it get so far. I wish I could take it back. But you can't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You didn't just ruin us, Sofia. You ruined yourself. You lied, you stole, and you didn't stop to think about the consequences until it was too late." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. And I'm paying for it now, every day. I've lost everything, Alex. My job, my reputation, my friends. You?" For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but I quickly pushed it aside. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. "I hope you figure things out," I said, standing up. "But I have nothing more to give you." I walked out, leaving her behind in the cafe. It felt like closure, not the kind I had hoped for, but enough to let me move forward, building something new. As time passed, my life began to take shape again. I focused on my career, throwing myself into projects that reignited my passion for engineering. I joined a local fitness group, rediscovering the joy of pushing my body to its limits. I even started volunteering, something I had always talked about but never made time for. Through these new activities, I met people who brought light back into my life. One of them was Julia, a kind and intelligent woman who shared my love of hiking and an appreciation for life's simple pleasures. We started as friends, but over time, something deeper grew between us. She was patient, understanding, and, most importantly, honest. Looking back, one evening, as Julia and I sat on a hillside watching the sun set over the city, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about her?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not in the way I used to. It's like looking at a scar. You remember how you got it, but it doesn't hurt anymore." She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're here now." "So am I," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I had found a new sense of purpose, a new sense of self, and, perhaps, a new chance at love. Months turned into a year, and life felt like it was truly mine again. The darkness of the past no longer lingered like a shadow over my every thought. I had built something new, piece by piece, and the foundation was solid. My relationship with Julia deepened, but it wasn't rushed. We both understood the importance of building trust carefully, something I hadn't fully appreciated before. Sofia's name rarely crossed my mind, though I occasionally heard whispers about her struggles. The last I'd heard, she was living with her sister and working odd jobs to make ends meet. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but another part reminded me of the choices she had made. Her downfall wasn't my burden to bear. An unwelcome reminder. One afternoon, as Julia and I strolled through the local park, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a name I hadn't seen in over a year, Sofia. My steps faltered, and Julia noticed immediately. Everything okay? She asked, her brow furrowing with concern. It's an email from Sofia, I said, my voice flat. Julia nodded, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. Do you want to read it? Or we can delete it and pretend it never happened. I appreciated her understanding, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email, skimming through the words quickly. Subject: an apology and a request. Alex, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm writing this because I need to make amends. Losing you was the greatest regret of my life, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on my mistakes. I've started seeing a counselor, trying to rebuild what's left of my life, but it's not easy. I know I hurt you more than words can express, and I'll carry the guilt forever. If you can find it in your heart to meet with me, just once, I'd like to apologize in person. Not to ask for anything, just to say what I couldn't back then. Please consider it. Sofia. The word sat heavily in my chest. I handed the phone to Julia, unsure of what to make of it. She read the email in silence and handed it back, her expression calm but thoughtful. What do you think? I asked. I think it depends on what you need, she said. If meeting her will give you closure, then do it. But if it's just going to open old wounds, it's okay to say no. I nodded, her words giving me clarity. Sofia's apology didn't change the past, but maybe hearing it in person would give me the final piece of closure I didn't realize I needed. The meeting. I agreed to meet Sofia at a quiet cafe in a neighboring town. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, her once radiant confidence replaced with a quiet humility. Alex, she said, standing as I approached. Her voice was soft, almost tentative. I nodded, sitting down across from her. Sofia. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, she broke it. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she cupped them around her mug. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. About you, about us, about how badly I screwed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Her words were sincere, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as someone who was trying to put herself back together. I appreciate that, I said. But you have to understand, sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't change the fact that you made choices that destroyed everything we had. I know, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I wish I could go back and undo it all, but I can't. All I can do now is try to be better. I nodded slowly, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. I hope you do. For your sake, Sofia. But my life has moved on, and I'm happy now. I hope you find your own happiness too. She smiled faintly through her tears. You deserve that happiness, Alex. Thank you for hearing me out. I stood to leave, the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. Take care, Sofia. You too, she said, watching me go. Moving forward. As I walked out of the cafe, the sun broke through the clouds, warming my face. For the first time in years, I felt completely free, not just from Sofia, but from the pain and anger that had held me captive. Julia was waiting for me at home, and as I drove back, I realized that the best part of moving on wasn't leaving the past behind. It was stepping into a future filled with hope. Life took on a new rhythm after that meeting with Sofia. It wasn't just closure, it was a turning point. I realized how much weight I had been carrying, even after the divorce, and letting it go felt like breathing fresh air after years in a suffocating room. Julia and I continued to grow closer. She brought a kind of calmness to my life that I hadn't realized I needed. She didn't demand explanations or dwell on the past, but she listened when I chose to talk about it. Her presence was a reminder that love could be simple, healing, and honest. One sunny afternoon, we found ourselves hiking in the hills just outside the city. The trail was quiet, the only sounds the crunch of gravel beneath our boots and the occasional chirp of birds. As we reached a lookout point, Julia turned to me, her face glowing in the golden light. "You've been different lately," she said, a teasing smile on her lips. "Different how?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Lighter," she said simply. "Happier." I nodded, looking out over the sprawling city below. "I guess I finally let go of everything. The anger, the resentment. Meeting Sofia wasn't easy, but it helped me close that chapter." Julia slipped her hand into mine. "I'm glad you did. You deserve to feel free." For the first time in years, I believed her. An unexpected opportunity. One evening, as I was going through my emails, I saw a message from an old colleague, Ethan. He had heard about my divorce and wanted to catch up, but the email wasn't just social. It came with a professional opportunity. "I'm starting a new engineering firm," Ethan wrote. "We need someone like you, someone sharp, reliable, and innovative. If you're interested, let's talk." The idea was exciting but also daunting. Joining a new firm meant stepping out of my comfort zone, taking risks I hadn't considered since my early career. But it also felt like a chance to truly start fresh. When I told Julia about it, she was immediately supportive. "You've been talking about wanting a challenge," she said. "This sounds perfect." After a long conversation with Ethan, I decided to take the leap. The job was demanding, but it reignited a passion I thought I had lost. Working with a team that valued my input and pushed me to excel reminded me of my own worth, not just professionally but personally. A new milestone. As my career flourished, so did my relationship with Julia. We moved in together after a year of dating, and our home became a place of warmth and laughter. It was a stark contrast to the strained atmosphere I had grown used to during my marriage with Sofia. One quiet evening, as we sat on the couch with a movie playing in the background, Julia turned to me, her expression unusually serious. "Have you ever thought about what's next for us?" she asked. I smiled, taking her hand in mine. "Every day. And I think I'm ready to take the next step," I said, pulling a small velvet box from my pocket. Her eyes widened as I opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Julia, you brought so much light into my life. I can't imagine the future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, her smile brighter than anything I'd ever seen. "Yes," she whispered. 8,000 times yes." Reflecting on the past. In the weeks that followed, as we planned our wedding, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. The betrayal and heartbreak that had once defined my world now felt like distant memories, lessons learned rather than wounds left to fester. Sofia's choices had broken me, but they had also forced me to rebuild myself, stronger and more resilient than before. And while I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, I was grateful for what it had taught me. Love wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about honesty, partnership, and finding someone who truly saw and valued you. With Julia, I had found all of that and more. The day of the wedding was perfect in a way I never thought possible. The ceremony was held on a quiet hillside, surrounded by close friends and family. The warm sun bathed everything in golden light, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the air. As I stood at the altar, watching Julia walk toward me in her flowing white dress, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Her smile was radiant, her eyes filled with the kind of love I'd once believed was lost to me forever. When she reached me, she took my hands in hers, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're my everything," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "And you're mine," I replied, meaning every word. A quiet redemption. During the reception, as laughter and music filled the air, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the venue. It was Sofia. She wasn't dressed for the occasion, just jeans and a simple blouse, but there was a softness to her expression I hadn't seen in years. I excused myself and walked toward her, unsure of what to expect. "I didn't want to intrude," she said when I reached her. I wanted to see you happy." Her words caught me off guard. "You've seen it," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to see for myself that you're okay. That you've moved on." "I have," I said simply. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried a lifetime of regret. "You deserve it, Alex. More than anyone." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "I hope you find your own happiness someday, too." Without another word, Sofia turned and walked away, leaving me with a strange sense of closure. She was part of my past, a painful, necessary part, but she no longer held any power over my present or my future. A love rekindled. As the evening wore on, Julia found me standing alone under the stars, lost in thought. She slipped her arm around my waist, her warmth grounding me. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Perfect," I said, kissing her forehead. "Better than I ever could have imagined." We stood there in comfortable silence, the sounds of laughter and celebration behind us. For the first time in years, my heart felt light, unburdened by doubt or regret. The life I had once dreamed of was gone, replaced by something even better, a life built on trust, resilience, and the kind of love that grows stronger with every challenge. And as I looked at Julia, my wife, I knew without a doubt that the future was ours to write. Epilogue, moving on. Sofia disappeared from my life completely after that day. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she eventually moved to another city, starting over in a quieter way. Whether she found what she was looking for, I never knew, and it didn't matter. For me, the past was a lesson, not a life sentence. Betrayal had tried to break me, but it had also taught me how to rebuild. And now, with Julia by my side, every day felt like a gift, a second chance at the happiness I thought I'd lost forever.